what I would say and my message, especially for those that are maybe feeling underrepresented, is that, you really do belong in the room, and your voice belongs at the table. And you need to show up for that as well. So don't sit in the back. Don't stay quiet and assume that you're not important to the conversation. I think if you're invited, just know that somebody felt that you were important. Somebody felt that you had a reason to be there. And so they want you to be there and they want you to have a voice at that table. So I think it's been so important that not only Asian females, but also just broadly, anyone who feels underrepresented at a conversation, you really want them to just show up and show their voice and believe in that.
Hello and welcome back to the Pharmaverse Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack. And if you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the pharmaceutical industry, well, then you're in the right place. And if you are in the right place, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the interviews that we do with the biggest names and the brightest stars in the pharma universe. Today's guest would certainly fit that description. We're joined by Kim Tran, PharmD, the Senior Vice President and Head of Medical Affairs at Syndax, a commercial stage biopharma in the malignant hematology space. Kim is an amazing leader, beloved by her people, and her story is just incredible. We're going to discuss how to lead with compassion, the qualities that make the best leaders, and what might be holding you back as a leader. You're just going to love this episode. Well, Kim, I know I've been so excited to have you on the air with us because you have such an amazing story. So I wanted to share that as much as we could with the other leaders that are interviewing. And a lot of the people that we interview on the show are shaped by their parents. And you told me an amazing story about your parents and everything they went through. So can you tell us a little bit about that to start us off?
Yeah, sure. And thank you so much for having me, Michael. I'm very excited and I feel incredibly honored to be here with you. Just a little bit about my parents and my story. So my parents are Vietnamese. They came to the United States actually as refugees from Vietnam. During the time of war, they were young teenagers and, they actually decided to escape the country by boat. And they were very fortunate after several weeks being out at sea to be rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard. And at that time, there was a lot of support from churches and temples across the U.S. actually that were seeking ways to help refugees. And so my parents were very lucky, along with my uncle and my aunt, to be adopted by an American family in New Jersey. And those individuals in that family eventually became my godparents and are now my lifelong family. This is really coming from that history and seeing their story of resilience has really shaped who I am today as a leader, as you say.
Yeah, tell me more about how that has shaped you. Because I got to think growing up with those stories, the trauma that they went through just to get here, that had to shape you as not only an individual, but as a leader. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up watching my parents work incredibly hard, long hours, multiple jobs, and we were very lucky that my godparents, who are amazing people, really took them in under their wings and helped them build a life here. And it just showed me a lot about the value of hard work. It grounded me in humility. And it also just taught me about compassion and kindness because it was really through the generosity of my godparents and also their courageousness, right? To take in five strangers when they already had four children of their own into their
Oh.
family, and really supporting them, helping them. It is something that I've learned a lot from, and it's something that I carry with me every day, both professionally and personally.
Any specific leadership lessons that you've taken from that experience and maybe that your parents taught you?
I think, growing up and watching them and my godparents, clearly just compassion, generosity, being able to just give yourself selflessly and to help others. They also taught me a lot about resilience, right? The importance of hard work. And I talk about the value of humility because they did have to overcome a lot of difficult circumstances and situations and challenges in their lifetime to be able to build and establish a family here in the United States. So that's taught me a lot, and it teaches me just those same principles as well today.
Let's pause a moment so I can tell you about our sponsors. First, K. Bassman International, your complete recruiting resource in life sciences. Our talent is finding yours. Executive Biotech Advisors, a strategic C-suite executive search firm specializing in biotech and pharma. And the Pharma Coach, an executive coaching platform that helps leaders build strong teams and cultures. Now back to the episode. Yeah, and speaking of today, would you use those same words to describe yourself as a leader, or have you adapted your own style from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about my own leadership style, that's, a lot of who I am today is really shaped, obviously, by my family and by those core values. I try to be authentic. I really try to keep it real in some ways. Maybe that's the New Jersey in me.
Hmm.
But at my core, I'm grounded by my values, right? I lead with a lot of purpose. I lead a lot with compassion and empathy. I know that at the end of the day, as a leader, our purpose is to create clarity, help people feel at ease, help them understand what's possible, and what their role and their impact can be. And so I really think it's important that leaders make sure their teams feel valued. When I think about my parents' journey and some of the really difficult jobs that they held throughout their lives, right? They just wanted to be respected for the role that they did. They wanted to be supported and feel heard. So I feel like no matter what role people play in any company, right, it's really important that people feel safe and trusted, and they really feel a part of a bigger team and a bigger goal.
Yeah, I could see a lot of that family, compassion, all those things going right into your leadership style. And that's why I start with questions that take me back in time to your childhood, because that's so foundational to who you are as a leader. You put a person in a different environment, totally different leader. So it doesn't surprise me. And anyone that's met you realizes how quickly that big heart of yours, gets transmitted onto the other person's. But speaking of a team, when you are the leader of a team that you've built, that's a big lift. Hiring all those people, all those interviews and everything. But inheriting a team that you didn't hire can be even a bigger challenge. And I know you've had to do that. What are the challenges of inheriting a team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as we talk about the stories and my core values, what I'll just add to is that I think hard work is really something that I'm committed to. And why I say that is also, I think when you're leading teams, you have a responsibility to also hold yourself at high standards, not just for myself as a leader, but also for people who work with me. I think it's so important for everyone to show up every day, um, doing their absolute best. I expect the same of myself. And I think when people have stories and challenges that they've had in their lifetime, you don't take things for granted. And you always want to make sure that you look at leadership as a privilege and that it's an opportunity for you to help others continue to get better. To your point about inheriting a team versus maybe building your own team, leading teams is not easy. I think whether you're inheriting a team or creating your own new team, I think trust is critical. Trust is the number one thing that you have to do as a leader to ensure that your team is successful. And the way that I think leaders have to approach it is really through consistency, a lot of transparency with the individuals that you work with, and a lot of communication.
Hmm.
As in the environment that we work in now, things are always rapidly evolving and changing, and information can be misunderstood very easily.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really critical for leaders, no matter if you're working with people or just getting to know them or just hiring them. It's so important to take that time to just listen, to build that trust, and then really to learn from people. And I would say do that at all levels of your organization, not just at those that are reporting into you, but really taking that time and dedicating your efforts into really understanding what the needs are across the entire team.
That's a really powerful insight. And it just made me think of the family that took you guys in. I mean,
Mhm.
they built a family like you've
Yeah.
built teams before, and then they inherited a family. In the example that I've had to inherit a team before, the point that I took from you is the transparency. And I wanted to talk to you about being transparent about your motive, because it seems like the team that the new leaders joining, it seems like, oh, she's gonna change everything. She's gonna do this. She's gonna do that. And if you do something without really a clear explanation, even about the motive, they could be taken negatively. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're spot on. I mean, I think it's hard. It's natural to have assumptions, when a new leader comes in, and maybe some anxiety, some level of anxiety of what will change versus what this leader will bring. But I think to your point, again, the transparency really comes through with communications, right? Making sure folks are in your organizations are very clear on what is your goal, what is your intent, and also what's your expectation, right? Your level of expectation of them, because maybe there was a certain way of working that worked for them prior, and that's why I say it's also a two-way conversation because you want to understand as well what has worked well and listening to them, and then also adapt your style to make sure that the kind of the blend of both of them is successful, because I don't think every leader is perfect and has all the answers either.
Yeah.
And so we have
True.
opportunities to learn and grow as well.
Good, great points. I'm thinking back to your parents on a boat, not sure if they're going to make it, but I'm sure that in those conversations, when they dreamed about what was going to happen, it was the motive for them was to create a better life for you and for your kids and for the generations to come. I bet they could have never dreamt that they would have a daughter with a doctorate degree that's now the SVP of medical affairs. What does that mean to you personally? Does that change all of your achievements and make it more poignant?
Absolutely. Well, first I'll say I don't actually think that my parents know what I do, which is okay.
Join the club. Yeah.
Although although they're absolutely very proud, and to your point, they could have never imagined, that, myself and my siblings as well, have been able to have the life that we have today, and I'm incredibly grateful. That's always how I live each day, incredibly grateful, not just for, what I'm given, but also the privilege to, help others as well. So this month specifically, I would say, when you're growing up with this deep understanding of your family's history, it gives you a great sense of gratitude, humility always for who you are, and really understanding your roots and where you come from and where your parents come from. I would say this month is also special, a lot for very special for the Asian community, myself included, as well as like it really just is an opportunity to pause and reflect, right? And celebrate Asian culture, celebrate the stories behind just everybody's stories, not just Asian American stories, but just stories that really represent who you are. And so, as someone that's an Asian American leader in the industry, especially being a minority as a Vietnamese American,
Mhm.
I do agree that representation does matter, right? It's important for me to continue to represent not only Vietnamese Americans, but also just leaders in the industry.
Well, for the next generation of Asian female leaders, describe some of the challenges that they may face and how you've overcome those.
Yeah, I hear this topic a lot, actually, Michael, and I get asked this question a lot. And I think one of the things that I hear often is the topic about how representation at the executive level, especially, is very few in the industry.
Mhm.
There's a report, I don't know if you're familiar, it's a nonprofit group called Elevate, where they look at statistics of Asian Americans and specifically East Asian Americans, which includes Vietnamese. And so if you look at those statistics, we hold about 1.2% of, say, executive boards or C-level roles. So it's a really small percentage within the overall Asian community. Getting roles at those levels is something that Asians and a lot of other underrepresented groups as well struggle with understanding. How do they continue to show their leadership so that they can continue to aspire for these roles. What I've learned through the years is that leadership requires you to have a voice. It requires you to have the courage to do things that maybe take you out of your comfort zone sometimes, to be represented at the table when you're invited to come and participate in a meeting or in some kind of discussion. It wasn't always easy for me as well. Over time, it took a lot of preparation. I had mentors, and I had a lot of support in people who valued my perspective and really encouraged me to share it. So, what I would say, and my message, especially for those that are maybe feeling underrepresented, is that, you really do belong in the room, and your voice belongs at the table. And you need to show up for that as well. So, don't sit in the back. Don't stay quiet and assume that you're not important to the conversation. I think if you're invited, just know that somebody felt that you were important. Somebody felt that you had a reason to be there. And so they want you to be there and they want you to have a voice at that table. So I think it's been so important that not only Asian females, but also just broadly, anyone who feels underrepresented at a conversation, you really want them to just show up and show their voice and believe in that.
I think that's great advice, no matter age, gender, race, or anything. I think if you're in that room, you should have a voice. Anyway, speaking about just leadership in general, um, is there any advice you would give to someone who's maybe just moving into their first leadership role?
I would say leadership's not easy. I mean, I think a lot of times folks get really excited and they want to have the title behind their names, but with the title also comes a lot of responsibility. And so I think when you're going into your first leadership role, it's really taking the time to be thoughtful and have intention, right? It's not always just transitioning into a new job. You have a bigger responsibility. So really understanding and investing the time early in relationships with your teams, to the point that we talked about earlier, just being very clear on your expectations and maybe your goals so that people know what you want to achieve. And what, sometimes for folks that are new leaders, like, you'll make mistakes. And the other thing that maybe someone doesn't always tell you is that you might not always be liked. And that's just something that you have to get comfortable with. And it's a part of growth. You do grow as a leader, not only in those moments where there's discomfort, but you also grow as much as well when you have great success. And those that are working for you work together and want to help you achieve the bigger goals.
Yeah, that's such great advice, especially the part about not always being liked. That's the part that is the challenge for me as a people pleaser. But you can't please everybody as the leader sometimes. It's just like not every decision you make is going to make your kids happy, but it's what's best, for the collective. Uh,
Absolutely.
but a lot of the people that do watch this show, because we're both in medical affairs, are going to be MSLs. What are some qualities, some skill sets, some things that you see in the best MSLs?
Yeah, thanks for asking me that question. I appreciate you asking me because being a field leader is probably one of the best jobs I ever had in my career. So, shout out to all the amazing MSLs out there who are listening. I think what makes the best MSLs are individuals who can balance scientific excellence. And they know this. There's MSLs everywhere supporting different therapeutic areas in their role, right? And to be that resource for your providers and really having the latest information on the science and the data to help physicians make decisions is so important. That's the primary part of their job. Credibility as well, curiosity, really understanding what's happening out in the external field, as we call it. And, just personally, it's really important that they have clear communication skills and also an enterprise mindset. I think one of the things that I heard and learned as being a field leader is a lot of times they're so far removed as an MSL from the business And maybe they're not always involved in the discussions of why a decision's being made, or maybe why is this initiative um, being asked of them. And so I think being a really successful MSL is one that can understand that enterprise, have that enterprise mindset, and be able to understand the full context of why it's important and why they're doing it out in the out in their day job. I think those are just some characteristics, I think, Michael, that I've
Mm.
seen make MSLs who are the best really even be greater in their roles.
What do you think the role of the leader is on helping the team, especially a field team that's remote, to have a more enterprise mindset?
You make a great point, and you're right. I think it is on the leader. A lot of times in field roles as well, you have regional managers also. So information sometimes gets maybe not always clearly communicated, right? As you have several layers. So I think you have to repeat it multiple times so that people can really process this and process and understand it. And I think it is the responsibility of the managers as well to pull through that. But I would say if you're an MSL, and whether or not you're new to role, or maybe you're new to the team, or maybe you didn't hear it completely, I would just encourage you to also ask the manager to clarify, right? Ask them to clarify and help give that perspective. I think any manager, it is their responsibility to help make sure that their teams understand what the overall enterprise goal is. So it's a two-way dialogue, I think, and it's continuous communication because it's not always clear. One time is never enough. Anyone who has reported into me knows one of my philosophies and data that shows you need to repeat it at least 7 times.
Wow.
So my teams always hear me go, "Are we on on number 7 yet?"
Nice. Yeah, our CEO, he goes, repetition is the mother of all learning. Repetition is the
Mhm.
mother of all learning. Right? And he just keeps repeating it. We
And
get it.
he's right.
It's
Yes.
true. It's true. It's the same with parenting. It's the same with a lot of things. We have to have reminders, and we all get stuck in our own swim lane and our own vantage point, our own remit. And sometimes it's good to, go above the trees, see the whole forest and get that perspective. And sometimes you need to be reminded.
Yeah.
Understandable. So another key thing that I get asked a lot about our podcast is hiring is such a hard part about leading. Is there some interviewing trick or some question you ask people that you'll know instantly if they're the right fit for you?
What I look for in interviews, and regardless of role, is really the critical thinking. I think it's how people think through the process. It's not what they've achieved. It's not the right answer or the perfect answer. It's listening to see how people think through the problem, how they critically think through the process, how they would have solved the problem, whether or not the answer is right or wrong. And it's also how they handle a challenging situation. In the environment we work on, incredibly complex every day. You're managing stakeholders internally, externally, cross functional teams. And I think what makes candidates successful are those that are leaders and what approaches they would take, right? And their first approach might not be the best. It might not be perfect. It might be a mistake even, but it's then what is the next alternative approach they would take. So it's really that critical thinking for me that's so key. And for an MSL, I think it's also even more important because for MSLs, there's an art out in the field. They say there's an art of being an MSL, really understanding how you navigate your customers or the healthcare providers, understanding their needs, and then using your unique skills to help bring the right insights. It's truly an art. And that's what makes MSL so special and so valued by companies.
Is that really the best indication of the type of MSL they're going to be?
I would say what it does show you is how prepared an individual is, right?
Mm.
How prepared they are for the conversation, how they communicate, because a lot of times the data that they have can be complex and maybe they're speaking to different audiences, whether it's an expert or maybe someone that's not an expert in their field. It's really, again, that art of MSL where they have to refine their communications. And so I think the presentation validates that they can kind of navigate complex discussions and be able to take them to the level of the audience. But I wouldn't say that's the key reason.
It does seem like if they hit the presentation out of the park, or if it's just kind of meh, or if they flop on the presentation, it doesn't matter what they've done in their whole career, that's what they're going to be judged on. But I do think you have a good point. It's about how the data is communicated. It's almost like, can you make it interesting? Can you tell a story? Can you tell a clinical story with the data? And if you could do that, I mean, then you do have the art of MSLing. But it doesn't tell you, like, how are you going to get into a difficult account? How are you going to deal with this or that? It only tells you that one metric, but it seems to be a really important one.
Yeah. I mean, and I would say it is because that is part of the core role of the MSL. I would say it's not the only one, but to your point, bringing all of the different pieces together and then also how they present the data and tell that story and make it understandable to their audience is a critical part of being successful in that role.
I want to piggyback on something you said earlier about, the challenges female leaders have. You brought up mentors. And if you think back of all the different mentors and all the people that have helped you and the leaders that gave you advice, what was the best piece of leadership advice that anyone has ever given you?
I would say one of the best pieces of advice, and it ties into my story and maybe who I am today, is has always been that people don't care what you know, right? When they first see you as a leader or when you join a team, what they want to do is know that you care. And that quote has always stuck with me. And if I think about, my parents, they didn't grow up with any formal education. They had no title to their work. But what they did and how they made an impact or how they were valued in their jobs was the way that they led with kindness. And so I think the way that you treat people is critical, no matter what role you're in, treating people with respect, showing gratitude for the work that they do, and never forgetting the importance of who you are. That's really how my leadership's been shaped. Leadership, I believe, has nothing to do with titles. There's a lot of leaders out there that have very important titles, but it's really about the personal commitment to serve others. I mean, when you sign up to be a leader, you're really signing up to a commitment to be selfless, right? You want to genuinely invest in helping people around you succeed. And as you know, it's an opportunity as a leader to open doors for other people. And it's those principles and those core values I learned from seeing how, my godmother opened the door for my parents that then comes back to my roots and teaches me every day how I can open the door for other people. How can I lift them up in their jobs? How can I make them successful and create opportunities for them that then lead to a greater impact as a whole?
I cannot think of a better point to end on because that really encapsulates the whole discussion. But I just want to thank you for being a guest on the Pharmaverse podcast. I know I've grown as a result of it. I learned a lot of things, and I'm sure our audience has too.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me. You're so awesome, and I really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Well, that concludes another episode of the Pharmaverse podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel because we have many great leaders lined up for you, and you don't want to miss a single career-enhancing insight. But as for now, that's a wrap. See you next time on the Pharmaverse.